like to thank Stephanie from Andover, Lynn from North Reading, Rebecca from Woburn, and Charlotte and Erin from Wilmington. And Erin's with us tonight handling all the tech issues. I'd also like to thank Jane from Wellesley Books. Second, this event is part of a series of virtual events for best-selling authors. Our next virtual author visit is Wednesday, October 14th at 7 o'clock. We'll be hosting Gregory Maguire in conversation with Daniel Handler, AKA Lemony Snicket. Maguire will be discussing his brand new book, A Wild Winter Swan, as well as Wicked, which is celebrating its 25th anniversary this month with a special edition. Third, know that this event is currently being live streamed on the Wilmington Library's Facebook page. Give it a like and feel free to share the video. It should be up for a couple of days anyway. Fourth, you will all be receiving a feedback survey shortly after this event ends. Within the next few days, please let us know what you thought of tonight's event and what you'd like to see for future events. Very importantly, also in the feedback survey will be a link to purchase an autographed copy of Craig's latest book, Next to Last Stand, Longmire Mystery. That would be from Wellesley Books, our bookstore partner. They'll ship it to you. And then there will also be a link for Hank's latest book, The First to Lie. And same thing, Wellesley Books is happy to ship you an autographed copy. Finally, to set expectations, I anticipate this event lasting approximately an hour. Hank and Craig will have a discussion. Hank will essentially interview Craig, and then we'll take questions from the audience. Tonight, we're going to have people type their questions into the comments. So I know we have a Q&A box, but just for some technical and functional purposes, we want everything tonight in the comment box. So comments and questions can go in the comment box. All right, so first I'm going to introduce tonight's moderator, Hank Phillippi Ryan, and then I'll introduce Craig Johnson. So Hank Phillippi Ryan is a USA Today best-selling author of 12 thrillers, winning the most prestigious awards in the genre, 5 Agathas, 3 Anthonys, the Daphne, and for the other woman, the coveted Mary Higgins Clark Award. She is also on-air investigative reporter for Boston's WHDH-TV with 37 Emmys and dozens more journalism honors. Book critics call her a master of suspense, a superb and gifted storyteller. And Hank's newest standalone psychological suspense thriller is The First to Lie. Publisher Weekly's star reviewed it, saying it was stellar, and Ryan could win a 6th Agatha with this one. So let's all give a big virtual round of applause to Hank Phillippi Ryan. We'll pause and do that, right?
Hey, thank you.
Great, and now let me introduce Craig Johnson. So Craig is the New York Times best-selling author of the Longmire Mysteries, which is the basis for the hit Netflix original series Longmire. He is the recipient of the Western Writers of America Spur Award for Fiction, and his novella, Spirit of Steamboat, was the first one-book Wyoming selection. And he is joining us tonight from Ucross, Wyoming, population 35. So let's all give a big virtual round of applause to Craig Johnson for joining us here tonight. And Hank and Craig, at this point, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome to Massachusetts, Craig. It's so crazy because you should be here in person.
I know.
So
like,
ridiculous.
And I'm feeling a little robbed too, like that. I mean, Judy, my wife, Judy, she feels robbed because she really likes going to the hotels that they send us out to when we're on tour. And I feel robbed because I like eating.
Yes.
And I love eating in New England, and so this is a terrible situation for us. The thing I laughed about, though, I have to admit, was when they told us that Wellesley Books was actually providing the books. That's where my wife went to college. So it was a little bit of a flash from the past for her.
Wellesley Books is a wonderful bookstore, and they will have signed copies of your book and my book, and it's terrific, and they're making it very easy. So we're very grateful to them. So all Judy had to do was go to college at Wellesley to get this to happen.
That was it. That's
the
it.
universe has a way of working. So how are you? I want to talk about your book and art and history and your writing and all those kinds of things, and we'll definitely take questions. But first, how are you? You got the book tour rug pulled out from under you. You should be flying around in airplanes and new cities. How are
Yeah,
you
but
doing?
that's only one, like maybe one month out of the year, like that. It's usually about 2-3 weeks, like that, of tour. When the real world kind of intrudes, on my usual world, like that. And it was nice of Robert to say like that, but to be honest, like that, they're only 25, like that in Ucross, not 35. But but nonetheless.
Well, those are tourists on the way.
I
Those
know,
are
yeah,
tourists on the way.
it's tourist season. It's true, like that, hunting season actually, like that. But yeah, I mean, the thing is like I have to admit that when you live in a town of 25, like on a ranch, where the nearest town has 25 people in it, like, and then you also know what it's like. I mean, it's a relatively isolated kind of lifestyle, for authors. I mean, basically, we sit in rooms by ourselves and type, about our imaginary friends, like.
Yeah, but I wonder about this. I mean, I know that in Ucross you're already pretty socially distanced and it's miles and miles, to get a cup of coffee.
Mhm.
But writing is solitary, but to me, it did have this sort of veneer of terror over it at the beginning. Did it affect you at all, your writing?
No, I don't really think so. Like that. I mean, just because we are so isolated and we're so far out and away, we were like on such of the back curve of what was happening, like that. To be able to hear and see, what all was going on and everything, and to hear from the CDC and everybody like that. And our governor, Mark Gordon, he was pretty secure in the idea that everything needed to be locked down pretty quick, like that. And even with only 500,000 people in the ninth largest state, he very early like that decided, okay, we're not going to have any groups this summer of over 250 people or something like that. Well, our big event is Longmire Days, where we have about 10 to 15,000 people show up, so we knew right away that wasn't going to happen like that. And so
So
that was
what did
kind of
you
the end of
do?
that.
What did you do for Longmire Days?
We were fortunate enough like that we had all of the actors, were kind of in the same, bowl as we were like that. And so, everything shut down for them. So there was no TV and no television production or anything, no film production or anything. And so they were all, kind of available. And so, we invited them, to come, virtually to Longmire Days like that. And it was a little bit of a challenge, I have to admit. I mean, me, Hank, like that. I mean, there's a reason why I write about a sheriff who doesn't even carry a cell phone.
Right. You and computers.
Yeah, technology is not my strong suit, like that. Not Walt's either, like that. And so it was kind of a tough situation to kind of overcome as far as that's concerned. But fortunately, there are people, that you can get that are a lot more knowledgeable about these type of things, like that. And so we had a really wonderful guy like that from over in Sheridan, like that, who was able to put things together for us, like at Paul Burkholtz, like that, and he was able to put things together, and we actually had a marvelous event. I mean, it went on, for like, I guess, a couple of days like that, with all of these different events, and all of the actors, participated. And, the raffle did really well. The auction did really well. So we made a lot of money for charity.
I bet you had people that wouldn't, I mean, not everybody can come in normal times. I bet you had people that would never have even been able to come at all.
We did. It was kind of shocking to me like that. I mean, I guess, I just, assume that, anybody who wants to go anywhere can go anywhere, but that's certainly not the case. I got all of these marvelous emails from all of these people like that for either for personal reasons or, for medical reasons or financial reasons or whatever. I mean, trying to get to Buffalo, Wyoming is a little bit of a chore. I mean, there is no Logan Airport, in Buffalo. Like you gotta,
That's good
you
news
really got,
and bad news.
yeah, you got to try to get
Days,
here.
Longmire Days, a celebration of your incredible, iconic main character, Walt Longmire. And I know people here tonight are just so eager to hear about your new book. And I have to tell you all, you're so lucky that you're all here tonight. In researching and looking into this book, it is amazing. And the background, the story behind the story is so amazing. And I can just say sort of parenthetically, it's such a reflection, Craig, of your own sort of multi-textured life. It has not only a wonderful mystery, but art and history. It's poignant, it's hilarious. It's just such an essential mystery. And you seem to sort of take it to a different level every time. But anyway, let's say, as I said, art and history and mystery. Let's start with the history. I mean, it's called next to last stand,
Mhm.
and that means Battle of the Bighorn, right? Tell me about that.
Well, I mean, it's about 90 miles up the road from where my ranch is, the Little Bighorn
Is it
battlefield.
really?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just up the road. Like, and it's one of those things where, like, I'm sure, like, that it's the same thing, there in New England, and nobody goes to see, the two lamps in the tower like that until you have, like, tourists or family in town that are not normally there like that, and then you have to go to the market, and all of these places like that, and all the things that you normally have to do, and it's one of those things that we kind of ignore to a certain extent until tourists come into town or family come into town and they want to go to the battlefield like that. But I've been up there numerous times like that. But in many ways, and you can back me up on this, if you feel the same way that I do, there are certain aspects of history or certain aspects, or maybe storylines that you think, yeah, someday I'm going to take a crack at that, but boy, I'm going to have to get a run at it, because there's a lot of research or a lot of information, that you're going to have to pack into those things like that. And, for me, like that's kind of what the Little Bighorn was and Custer. I mean, I've seen an awful lot of authors and an awful lot of readers and people who study the West and all that kind of disappear into that rabbit hole and not come back up.
Yeah.
They
And you
it's
have
just
to get it, you have to get it right, because there are
oh,
people who know.
oh, oh, they'll eat you alive if you don't. Like, you got to make sure you get it absolutely everything absolutely right. Like, and so it was a little intimidating to think about including that, in one of the books, and so the thing that happened, of course, is that, I kind of stumbled into, a little bit of information, as far as that's concerned in the literary sense. I ran into a collection of essays by Norman Maclean, like the famed author who wrote A River Runs Through It,
Oh, right.
Young Men and Fire,
Mhm.
like and just a marvelous, marvelous writing instructor, I think, from the University of Chicago, like that. And he was a heck of a writer, like that. And he had a collection of essays that he that had it kind of, it dealt with, Custer. I think it was one of the books that he was thinking about writing sometime in the future, but he never really got around to it. And then, that it actually summoned up, something that I was aware of, which was a painting like that I'd first become aware of, like it by just simply being in enough saloons and bars like it in the West. And I know, you're a good girl, Hank. You've never been in a bar or a saloon
Yeah.
like that, so you wouldn't know anything about that like that. But it's one of those things that I defy just about anybody to not having seen this painting like that. They may not know Cassilia Adams, but I can guarantee you they probably know Custer's Last Fight like that. And the first mentioning of it in a literary sense that I came across was actually in Hemingway's For Whom the Bell Tolls like that. And there's a
How?
sequence. There's a sequence in that book like that where Richard Jordan is actually talking to his grandfather. And it takes place, in a saloon in Red Lodge, Montana, and they look up on the wall like that, and the painting is actually there. And it's probably one of the most succinct descriptions of Custer, maybe that I've ever heard like that. And his grandfather, who was a cavalryman, and in the army and all of this, makes the remark. He says, well, Custer was not a particularly intelligent individual like that. And of course, Jordan gets, all worked up. He's young and, full of verve, and he can't believe that his grandfather is besmirching, the background, and history of, of George Armstrong Custer like that. And then his grandfather goes on to say, and he wasn't a particularly good, cavalry officer. He had a couple of, wonderful talents. And one of those talents was the ability to get into trouble. And the other talent that he had was the ability to get out of it until he didn't. And so, when you do a little bit of the research, you find out that, yeah, Custer was, he was quite a dashing cavalry officer, from the Battle of Gettysburg, like that, during the Civil War, and kind of held his own against Jeb Stuart and a number of others like that. But, then the history starts taking a little bit of a turn, like at the Indian Wars.
But I
And
mean, I think the really fascinating thing about history, one of the things, and the thing that you delve into so gorgeously in this book, is how history depends on who's telling the story.
a great deal like that. And there are two major components of that. Like it, obviously there were two groups that fought in the battle like it, but I'll get to that momentarily. The other is that we're extraordinarily fortunate in that we, in the last, I guess, maybe 10, 20 years, there have been a lot of really remarkable nonfiction authors who've, kind of risen, and kind of raised the bar to such an
Right.
extent, because you remember as well as I do that like an awful lot of history books, like, were horrible, horrible books. I mean, they were just, all they were just, dates and numbers and all of this. And you never really got a sense of scale. You never really got a sense of, the human aspect, of the history like that. And, a lot of the authors like that have kind of come, to the fore here lately like that. And one's right up there, in New England, like at Nathaniel Philbrick, like that, who I think is, probably one of the most marvelous, nonfiction historical writers that there are. Like at, and I was fortunate enough, like at, to be invited up to the Nantucket Book Festival, like that. And you'll get a laugh out of this, like that, because whenever Judy was telling me, she said, well, we should go do that one, like that. And I was like, okay, like that, and she was talking about getting there and everything. And I said, well, we'll just get a rental car at Logan and drive over. And there was a long pause, and she's like, it's an island, Craig. Like, and I was like, oh, okay. Like,
Well,
but you
we
explained it to
probably
me.
couldn't get around Ucross, Wyoming.
Right. It's a lot more complex over there. There's water, like it, But
So what was it about? What was it about the Battle of Little Bighorn, or as it's the other Native Americans call it something else?
the Battle of the Greasy Grass. And it's kind of interesting like that, because I mean, well, there are all of these authors like that that have kind of come to the fore, like Nate's book, The Last Stand, James Donovan's book, A Terrible Glory, is another. Like at James, but then you got to look at it also in the sense that there were two parties in this particular battle. The other big misnomer, I think, also is that that this was two armies. That a lot of people, when you say that it was a battle, like at the imagery that people come up with it is that it was like two armies fighting each other, and that was not particularly the case. Like this was an expeditionary force, going into Indian country, like and overtaking a nomadic people that were basically a city. They were basically a city, a nomadic city on the move, like that, which meant that they were not alone there, with just fighting men like that. They were there with their wives, their children, the elderly, the infirm, everybody. And, it's kind of interesting to think about, because, one way you can look at that and you can say to yourself, well, that put them at a dreadful disadvantage in an attempt to try and protect, their loved ones. The other side of the blade is that they had their loved ones behind them, and they knew that that they were facing annihilation to a great extent. And so, what more powerful motivation could a fighting force have than to be fighting to try and defend your loved ones? And then the numbers were not very good like that, because Custer's command was a little over I think about 700 command like that, and with the Lakota and the Cheyenne like that, it was almost 10,000. That they stumbled onto, like it, and it didn't go very well. It didn't go very well at all.
You were telling a story that I heard somewhere about how you had said to someone talking about the casualties of that battle.
I did. I made the mistake of standing up there, at the Little Bighorn battlefield with my good friend Charles Little Old Man, tribal elder and a chief of the Northern Cheyenne tribe, and I made the mistake of saying something along the lines of, "Well, yeah, but there weren't any survivors like that." And then he paused for a second. And he goes, "Yeah, actually, Craig, there were thousands of survivors. They just weren't white. That's all." So, kind of set me back on my heels.
But I mean, isn't that so interesting? Because one of the things that you talk about, you're so socially responsible in all of your books in the most gentle of ways. So we'll talk about that too. But so how do you get Sheriff Walt Longmire involved in in a battle that took place in 1876? How do you make that be compelling and new and unique?
You are such a wonderful interviewer. Like your abilities like that are just amazing. Like because, and also the fact that you're approaching it also like that as an author, like that, and most of the times, people, I mean, as well as I do, like that, the coming up with, some sort of instance, or coming up with some sort of a plot line or something, it really doesn't do you much good unless it's accessible, like unless you can find some way, that your characters, can get involved, with this particular storyline like that. And, that was the big thing like that, first of all, like that, I had to, take this huge, epic piece of, American Western history, that I had done, history. I had done the research on for like on and off for something like 8 years, like that. And then, but you have to find an access point. You have to find some way like that to make it an access point, to the characters. Well, that's when the painting, kind of like came to the fore, like that. And a lot of people don't know about the painting, like that. They know of the painting, but they don't know the history of the painting.
Okay, so first of all, we have almost 100 people here, which is wonderful, which I love. This is only you could do this, but you just happen to have this painting. So let's see it, and let's see if anybody recognizes it.
I can now. It's going to be a little clumsy. I will warn you, like that, because the version I've got is, it's a little large, but it's the only one that I don't have that's framed, like it. And so you're going to have to, like, excuse me, like I will bring it up over here, like it, and allow everybody to see it to a certain extent. The gloss from it won't be too bad, but there you can kind of see. There's Custer, in the center, completely surrounded, by some questionable looking Indians. Also the topography of the painting itself is a little bit off. That really doesn't look like the Bighorn Mountains in the background. And also the Indian, the village is on the wrong side of the Little Bighorn River. So there are a lot of inconsistencies here. Look at, even with Custer himself, if you look at Custer, you can see he has the long hair, which of course he was very famous for. Well, the night before this particular battle, he cut his hair off, so his hair wasn't that long. He's holding a saber, which he was not holding. They were an expeditionary force and were not supplied with sabers. There are an awful lot of inconsistencies here, but the ones that really strike me the most are, if you look at these Zulu warriors, that they're, that are here in the painting, it's really kind of strange. The headdresses look like they're, actually, from the Seminole tribes in Florida. The shields and everything look like Zulu warriors, and there actually is a reason for that. There was, it's kind of interesting, in that the son of Cassili Adams actually, he did an interview where he discussed the painting. And one of the things he talked about was the fact that his father in St. Louis, he was a painter there in St. Louis, had actually had, cavalry officers and some natives had come in their traditional garb, so that he could use them as models for his painting, and if that is the case, which I don't know. I mean, getting the cavalrymen in there would probably be a little easier, but only 10 years after the Little Bighorn, it probably was going to be a little bit difficult to get Lakota and Cheyenne warriors to come in.
You come pose for me.
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
So we have the puzzle pieces here of the Battle of Little Bighorn and George Custer and Cassili Adams's huge painting, right?
Yep.
And so what does that have to do with Walt Longmire?
Well, we're fortunate, here in Buffalo, which is about 20 miles down the road, and kind of the model for Durant, the capital, the county seat, for Absaroka County, the fictitious 24th county in Wyoming, And right outside of Buffalo is an old fort, at Fort Mckinney. And Fort Mckinney was actually built in response to the Little Bighorn battle. There was a huge scare that happened, after the Little Bighorn. I mean, the country was celebrating its 100th birthday, and they really weren't prepared, for, their army to be knocked back on its heels by what at that period in time was seen as being, very primitive, natives,
1876 when this happened, as you were saying, the centennial, 100 years since 1776.
Yeah.
I looked this up. I looked up what else happened in 1876 because I was trying to gauge, sort of how long ago that was. And Bell got the patent for the telephone, and the American Librarians Association was formed, and there was a presidential election that was not decided until the next year. So all history is just completely fascinating. And there was baseball, right? They were playing it.
Oh, absolutely. In Chicago, they were playing a doubleheader while this battle was going on, and so it's kind of crazy, to try and see the context, of it. But
so
yeah,
I'm bringing you back. So
okay.
Cassili Adams paints this big painting of the Battle of Little Bighorn. Why did he paint that?
At that point in time, one of the big, one of the big fascinations, with these historical moments, and you have to remember, there was no 24-hour news cycle, there was no, news reels, there wasn't anything like that. And so what they did was they would do these paintings like that, these big, huge paintings, and they would take them out on the road like that, out all over the country like that, and they would light them and charge people 2 bits, to come in, to the wagon and see this like that. And so it was an opportunity for them to like kind of relive this historical moment, and so they had gone on this big tour like that, and went all over the country with this painting, and then it came back to St. Louis like that, and they didn't have anything to do with it. And so actually the saloon owner there, beside the train station in St. Louis, offered to buy the painting. And so he bought it and put it up on the wall like of his saloon as, kind of a conversation piece, for when people would come in between trains and have a drink like that. They would discuss the battle and, have a little bit longer conversation, maybe drink a little bit more. And so that went on for a number of years until what happened is what happens sometimes, with these type of establishments. This one went bankrupt and it went out of business. And one of its largest creditors at that point in time was a then small brewery in St. Louis by the name of Anheuser-Busch. And Augie Busch, comes strolling in the door there, and looks around at him and says, "Hey, you owe me $30,000 for all the beer. How are you going to pay for it?" And they said, "Well, we don't have any money. We're bankrupt." And, he was always an entrepreneur, always a man who could spot an opportunity like it. And he looked up on the wall and saw this big, huge 16.5-foot by 9.5-foot painting and said, "I'll take the painting." They peel it off the walls. He rolls it up, puts it under his arm, hikes back up to the brewery, rolls it out on the table there in front of his merchandising and marketing guys, and says, "We're going to make posters of this painting. And we're going to send it out to every bar, every saloon, every restaurant, everybody that sells Budweiser beer. And by the time we're done, we're going to be a much larger brewery than we are now." Well, boy, did it work. It worked with a vengeance is what it worked. Like at one point in time, they were shipping out more than 1 million lithographs, chromolithographs, and posters all over the world. And so they used it, as a publicity point, everywhere. And down at the bottom, it would always say Anheuser-Busch, Budweiser Brewery at the bottom there. And it stayed like that, for a number of years until in the 1930s when they felt like, okay, we kind of got our 40 and found out of this like that. And so in a fit of philanthropic zeal like that, Augie Busch decided to donate the painting to the 7th Cavalry headquarters, which at that point in time was in Fort Bliss, Texas. And so he gave it to them, and actually it got sent up to Boston, I think, with the WPA, and was, completely cleaned up and redone and everything, and then sent to Fort Bliss in Texas. And they put it up on their commissary wall where it hung until 1946, when the commissary burned to the ground and the painting was destroyed. Or was it? And that's kind of the key element here. The crux of the book is that, well, was this painting destroyed or was it not? And
all of you who are here tonight, are thinking, what are they talking about Little Bighorn and this painting? And it, just like every Longmire story, it all comes together beautifully in the end. And now when you read this book, and I know you will have such a deeper understanding of the history of this and the background of this. And is this a little fragment of the painting on the cover, or? It
actually is. Yeah, you can actually see it's the exact same painting like that. And it's available everywhere. And it's like I said, it's like in every restaurant and bar and saloon all over the country like that. But one thing I did touch upon that I didn't really finish up with was the Zulu warrior kind of aspect of the painting. The reason for that is that 10 years after the Little Bighorn was the Rorke's Drift battle with the Zulus for the British Army. And so once again, history kind of repeated itself. Here you had this technologically advanced country that was set back on its heels by these primitive tribesmen and kind of slaughtered. And so it kind of had a little bit of a reflection in Cassili Adams's work with that painting like that. But anyway, I get to continue and answer your question.
And I have to tell you that Cassili Adams died in Traders Point, Indiana, where I'm from.
Oh my goodness!
Isn't that amazing?
I had no idea.
Well, how would you know?
I am stunned.
Isn't that so interesting? Anything about the universe and
I had no idea.
So tell how. So how does Walt get involved with whether this painting? I'm going to do this, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, as I was talking about Fort McKinney, like up the road here, like that, and that all of the communities basically in the high plains used the Little Bighorn as an opportunity to maybe try and get military forts built. They basically petitioned, the federal government and said, hey, we're completely surrounded by hostiles. We're going to be wiped off the face of the map anytime, like that, which was total crap. Like, it was not true at all, but it was a nice opportunity, like, because it really gave a great economic boost, to all of these little, towns all scattered along, the high plains. And so anyway, like, they got their wish, like, and they did, build a fort here, Fort McKinney, like, and Fort McKinney was staffed until the turn of the century, around 1903, like that, when the fort was decommissioned. And then they gave the fort to the state of Wyoming. And the state of Wyoming used it as what they referred to as their soldier and sailor's home. It was a veterans home at that point in time, like, and it became the Wyoming Veterans Home. And I remember asking the then sheriff, years ago, Larry Kirkpatrick. I asked him, like, do you ever have any reason to go up? Because I'm always looking, for opportunities, for sheriffs to be involved with things. And it usually doesn't take too much of a reach because they're usually involved with everything. It's a very non-discriminate, form of law enforcement. You get lumped into doing everything like that. And so I asked him, I said, do you ever have any kind of dealings up at the, at the veterans home? And he said, well, yeah. He said, what'll happen is, he says, one of the veterans will pass away. And so then what'll happen is, we'll get a phone call and we'll go up, like, and in their foot locker, they've got, a weapon or ammunition or, things that are left over from their service years, that they need to, get rid of, like, and so we'll take those things and get rid of them. And my own personal, connection with Fort McKinney is that there was this group called the Waivers. And they were these old guys, like, these old veterans, like that would sit out in front of Fort McKinney, and they would wave at traffic, is what they would do. Like,
Is that real? It's real?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. And they, and this was like, this is hearkening back, when I first built my ranch, almost, creeping up on 25, 30 years ago. And so back 25, 30 years ago, I mean, there were guys from World War II, there were Korean War veterans, Vietnam War veterans, like that, and they would wave, when I'd be on my way up the mountain, like that, I would see them and wave. And of course, after a while, like, you're as guilty as I am, I know, like that, if you think there's a story to be sniffed out, or, like, somebody to talk to who might, have an interesting story, well, you're going to stop, you're going to talk to them, like that. And so I got in the habit, wherein I would stop, like that, and talk to those guys, like, and just listen to the stories that they had to tell, like that, because, you get to a certain age where you start realizing, like that every individual that dies, like, it's like a small library burns to the ground and it's lost, and so
that is history. You lose that if you don't draw those stories.
Yeah, and it's not so much the big written dramatic epic histories. It's those small social histories like that maybe even have something more to say. I mean, you know about this more than I do, like that you can tackle these big epic stories, you can tackle these big historic moments, but the real thing is when it comes down to a human scale, like you really have to find a way to make it so that people can understand it and have a scope.
So so how did you put the art and the history and
well, my wife Judy, like with her Wellesley background, like is an art history major, and so I've learned over the years a lot about art, like that. And one of the things I learned is that a lot of artists will do what they call a study. They'll do these art studies like that, where if they've got a particularly difficult portion of a painting, they'll sit down and like work on that small portion of a painting, and then they simply discard that piece. It's not really something they're going to use later on. And so, of course, what happens is Walt, gets up there, to Fort McKinney, like he gets called, by the administrator and says, we've got a little bit of a situation. Can you come up here? And Walt goes up there and he's confronted, with this portion of a painting, a little portion of a painting that looks hauntingly familiar. It looks somehow, familiar. He's not sure where he's seen it or where it's from, like that, but it has something about it that looks familiar, like that. And then even more, I guess to the point, like that, he finds this Forsheim shoebox that's packed with $100 bills, with basically $1 million in unmarked bills in this guy's footlocker. And then the question becomes, where did Charlie Lee Stillwater, come up with $1 million in $100 bills? And what is this strange little part of a painting like that he had, tucked away in this footlocker? that. And it sends Walt off on his very first art heist.
I can't believe that you have taken an art heist and put it in Wyoming. Only you and Walt Longmire could do that. It's such a good mystery and such a good story and such a page turner. I don't want to give, I mean, it has your, your setting, your gorgeous setting and your wonderful dialogue and your poignant discussions and the gorgeous ending. But how do you, I mean, Sue Grafton used to say that Kinsey Malone revealed herself to her through the books. Do you know Walt totally, or does he reveal himself to you as you write?
Oh, I think, and you know about this as well as I do. Like, I mean, everybody's got their own process and everything, but I think, one of the quotes I used early on like that was that, true friends are the ones that you can hold close like that, but still never lose their ability to surprise you. And I think that, that's one of the joys of, trying to write, multi-faceted characters. I mean, you really want them to be truly human. You don't want them to be cardboard characters that you just use, to kind of put through the motions, of, one formulaic plot and then the next, that, these are, cases like that, and they're going to have, an effect, they're going to have recriminations like an effects, on the characters as they go through them. Like that's one of the things that I take into consideration.
Past, his history and his past, his decision-making process, his understanding of the world, his understanding of how people think and what they want. That comes from somewhere, that comes from his past as well.
Oh yeah, like that. And that's, that's one of the things I try and take into consideration, with each book. I mean, this was a book that, I had thought about, 8 years ago. But I really kind of had to get the characters, to a place where this storyline would actually reveal something about them. That's kind of important. I mean, you don't want to waste, a good storyline if it's not going to, promote those characters and evolve those characters and develop those characters. Like, and then, the other one for me is also the seasons. I mean, it takes me 4 books to get through Walt's, 1 year of Walt's life. Every once in a while, somebody will say something to me about how Walt is getting older. And I'm like, well, you have to take into consideration that, like, we've known for Walt for 16 years, but it takes 4 books for me to get through, 1 year of Walt's life. So Walt's only 4 years older than when we first met him 16 years ago, like that, which is a program that I would like to sign up for if at all possible.
Exactly. Like I did that in my books too, in my Jane Wyland books. There are 4, she's a television reporter, and the year has 4 rating periods: February, May, July, and November. So the books only take place 4 times a year in the seasons of television.
Because ratings are important, damn it. Like,
but I mean, that allows her not to get old.
Yeah. For me, it was the big thing was the weather. That was the big thing, like that, because the majority of any book that you're going to write, in the American West and certainly in Wyoming, a certain percentage of that book is going to have to take place out of doors. And so, I thought, okay, well, if Walt's going to have to, be whipping around all over Wyoming, going to these different museums, like to try and track down what this painting is, what it's worth. I mean, I discovered that, if this painting were to still exist, like the folks over at the Buffalo Bill Center for the West over in Cody informed me that it would be worth, $25-30 million, simply because of the social aspect of it, like, and the effect that it's had,
and so that has, in a good mystery, there has to be really high stakes.
It does. It does.
For people to do something that, to kill someone or steal something, or there has to be a good enough motivation to make the story make sense. So when you found that painting, then you found the nugget of your story. You found the gold.
Oh, absolutely. Like, and then the fact that it was tied into this area like that, and then also had that much of a scope, that like everybody had seen this thing, like it's hung everywhere.
So when you're writing the books now, do you picture Robert Taylor as involved? I mean, nobody. And somebody is saying in the Jamie is saying on the chat, he can't imagine, or she can't imagine anyone else as Longmire. And so you have so many fans of the television show. Has he morphed into Robert Taylor in your head?
Probably. No, I don't think so. Like that. I mean, I was writing the books for about 8 years before Warner Brothers came and knocked on the door. And, one of my favorite quotes, you've heard me say it, is the one from Wallace Stegner on writing and teaching fiction, where he says, the greatest piece of fiction ever written is the disclaimer at the beginning of every book that says nobody in this book is based off anybody alive or dead. Like, what a crock that is. I mean, that's what you do, is go find interesting people like that and use them, as the characters in your books. Like, and so, all of those characters are all kind of based off of friends and family and people I've known my whole life. And more based, more off of their voice, maybe, than anything else. I mean, that's one of the things I'm always telling students whenever I'm doing workshops like it or something. I'll always tell students, you only get to describe a character one time, only once. You don't get to describe that character all the way through the book, but that character is going to speak all the way through that book. Like it. So if you're going to invest your time and energies like it into any kind of differentiation for that character, the voice is what you really need to shoot for, to make that voice, descriptive enough, like it, and distinctive enough that, that the reader will know who's talking. So you don't even have to say things like, Walt said, Vic said, Henry said, or things like that. As soon as they hear the voice, they know which character that is that's speaking.
And but that comes from a real knowledge from the author of who that character really is and why they're doing what they're doing and what they want and how far they'll go to get that thing, what that particular character would say or do. And so much of that comes from other details. And I mean, I love that the money was in a Florsheim shoebox, which is totally, is totally descriptive. A person of a time, we can picture that. And and John has a wonderful question, and it's so interesting. How do you, about that kind of thing, how do you decide when to go into great detail? For example, the bark beetle or injury to Cliff Cly, or just drop names like Tom Mix. When do you take reality and put it in? When is it all research? When is it fiction? I know Lee Child used to talk about, he would get a question saying, how did you know that the button in the M, whatever it is, tank, that for stopping the tank was red? And he's like, I made that up. Like it should have been red. So how do you decide what to be real and what to be fiction?
It's, there are a couple of points to that. Like I'm one of those guys, like I'm on the other end of the spectrum. Lee's very secure in himself, like that, so he can make those things up. Like I will go find, an armored, transport vehicle somewhere, at a veteran's home or at, somewhere, at an ROTC unit or something, and find that button. I will go find that button and see where it is, like and what color it is, like because I'm just so scared to death, like that somebody will say, yeah, that button's not red, just so you know, like. So I try and track down those things as much as I possibly can. And then, that makes for a difficult situation like that, because as you got to kill your darlings like it. And I think it was Cornelia Reed tells this hilarious story where she was talking about one of her books where, she was talking about the inland waterways, the canals of New York State. And she just became absolutely fascinated, with it. And, she just went down the rabbit hole, just dived right in. And so then, when she turned the first, draft of her book in, the editor said, does somebody drown in the canal like that? And she's like, well, no. Like, and she goes, you got 5 pages. You get 1 paragraph is what you get. So
the canal was outside,
Exactly. Like it's unfortunately like that, there are editors to kind of tell us, when we've kind of gone overboard. And I happen to live with one of those editors. Judy will look at me every once in a while and she'll go, why is this here? Why is all this in here? I mean, is this important?
Tell her that Tess Gerritsen always says, you can always tell when an author's research slip is showing. Right? Because they looked up medieval armor, and by golly, everything about medieval armor is going to be in that book.
Oh yeah.
One of my books, I think the first alive, I wrote this jury deliberation scene. It's a perfect jury deliberation scene. And my editor emailed me and says, that is the best jury deliberation scene I have ever read. And I'm like, great. And she says, it all has to go.
Oh, no.
Who cares about people sitting in a room talking about it? So, but I think, kill your darlings. They're not my darlings if they slow down the pace.
Yeah.
So you have a wonderful way, you and Judy have a wonderful way of figuring out your pacing and how your books work. Tell us about that.
Well, I think, one of the big things for me is that, I'm definitely one of those guys that likes to sit down and do an outline of a book. And that's another one of the things I'm always telling students, and I'm always saying, some of the hardest things to try and teach students are little things like, well, it's not little, pacing. Pacing is impossible to teach. It's one of those things that, it's going to evolve. Your ability to be able to understand pacing is going to evolve. The more you write, the better of a sense you're going to get, from your own books and your own writing as to what that pacing should be. But one of the things you can do to give yourself a little bit of an advantage, it seems to me, is to do an outline. Because the other way is that you have to write the entire book and then go back and you're taking big chunks out or putting stuff in and all that. And that seems like a clumsy way, to handle that type of thing. Whereas if you have an outline, you can look at that outline. It's like looking at the structure of a building. You're looking at the blueprint, or you're looking at the skeleton, of the structure. And you can say to yourself, okay, boy, I'm really expository heavy in the beginning of this book. I got way too much information. I need to move some of that information back into some of the later chapters. And that's a lot easier to do in an outline than it is to try and rewrite an entire book like that. And so that's one of the, the advantages I think of, doing the outlines like that. But yeah, the other thing is the more you do it, the easier it gets. The more you get a sense.
Oh, that's not true. The more you do it, the harder it gets. You have to be better. And the story, you have raised the bar, you've leveled up, as they say, on every book that you write. And that's hard. You may understand when your pacing is off, but I completely disagree. I think every time I write a book, I think I can't do this. I forgot. I don't know how to do this. I have to learn all over. But
but that's good though. That's good, because I'm firmly of the belief that any kind of artistry comes from a sense of insecurity. There has to be a sense of insecurity. The minute you start looking at your books and going, boy, I'm a genius. You are dead at that point in time. It's over with. I think that insecurity is a very, very important part, of the process. And you have to get to a point where you embrace that, because I remember when I started out, I was frozen, thinking, I don't know what I'm doing. I have no idea how to do this, and that's why the first draft of The Cold Dish was 650 pages long, is because I was going to put everything in there. Because I thought, boy, they're never going to do another one. So this is it. I've got to put everything I can into this one, and then
when you edit then and you carve away everything that isn't the book and you see, what the good book is in there, you almost didn't know you did it. And then you see what matters. It's sort of magic, isn't it?
It is but I've also got a theory in that when I'm doing research, especially one that's going to be a really strong, research heavy book, like Next to Last Stand, is that I do a ton of research about everything, but I'll be honest with you, what? I don't write a lot of it down. I don't have catalogs of information and Post-its and notes and all those type of things anymore. Generally, what I tend to do is I do all of that research, and then what I do is what I remember, what I think was interesting, what I think, what caught my interest. They don't need to know everything. If they're really that interested in the Little Bighorn, there are marvelous, marvelous books out there that do nothing but tell you the history of the Little Bighorn like that. But
as we were saying at the beginning, the history is through the eyes and brains and minds and emotions of the characters who tell you that. And you do that so beautifully in Next to Last Stand.
But it's also one of those things where I kind of tend to refer to it as the creek bed method of research, in that, whatever is left on the top, when you look through the water in the creek bed, the shiny bits there like that, that's what needs to be in the book. Little details, little quirks, little things, they're sometimes more informing than, the great histories, in my opinion.
Definitely so. And but when what stays in your brain is the real world, and then when you write the book, then you're writing in that world.
Yeah.
I'm seeing questions, and quickly, I'm seeing questions about the movies. Could there be a movie? Are there going to be more TV shows? Everybody loves, and Jamie is a man. Okay, I want to make that clear from the comments. Thank you. Will there be more video of any kind? And what do you think about yes or no about that?
Well, we're kind of like in a holding pattern is what we are. It's kind of funny like that because we're in the enviable position that we were never really canceled like that, because we kept our audiences like that, and the enthusiasm for the television show, it stayed like that. It was really kind of wonderful. The problem was we were kind of victims of our own success like that, in that after 3 years after 3 seasons on A&E, we were the highest rated scripted drama that they had ever had. And they did what, I guess, most networks would do. They tried to buy the show from Warner Brothers, who are the producers of the show. And Warner Brothers, wouldn't sell it to them like that. They knew they could make a lot more money if they bought the show like that, rather than trying to pay, Warner Brothers like that to do the show and then, basically lease it from them. And then Warner Brothers wouldn't sell like that. And then A&E decided, well, if you're not going to sell it to us, we're going to cancel it like that. And so they did like that. And we were fortunate enough like that Peter Roth, the head of Warner Horizon, like it's the television wing of Warner Brothers, he went out immediately like and started looking for another network. He knew, he said, this is a winning television show that's pulling in close to 6 million people a week. And he said, this is a winning show. And so, we'll find another network is what we'll do. I remember asking him, I remember saying, well, where do you think we're going to end up? And I remember him telling me, he said, well, I think, you have to remember that this was, quite a while back. This was a number of years ago. He said, well, I think where we're going to end up, Craig, is one of these streaming services. And I was like, what's that? And he says, well, it's where you can, watch television, on your phone and on your computer. And I was like, oh, that's it. We're dead. That's the end of it.
That'll
We're
never
gonna
work,
have a
right?
chance now. Yeah, it'll never work. Well, that was Netflix. So obviously I'm an idiot. And so if I give you any stock tips, don't pay any attention to them at all like that, because I have no idea what's going on in the world out there. And so we switched over to Netflix. We ran for 3 years on Netflix. We became, one of the top 20 shows on Netflix, and Netflix went to Warner Brothers and said, we want to buy Longmire. And Warner Brothers once again said, no, we didn't sell it to A&E, and we're not likely to sell it to you either. And Netflix was a little bit kinder about the whole situation and said, well, okay, well, we're going to do one more season and then we're going to stop producing And so that's when we stopped doing the show But the one thing that's happened here that gives me a great deal of hope is the fact that Warner Brothers came out and said here about a year ago that they were going to start their own streaming service. All of the big studios have figured out that making television and movies is hard, but having streaming service platforms is actually pretty easy that. And so Paramount's got one, ESPN's got one, CBS has got one, and Warner Brothers announced that they were going to have one too. And I can't help but think that since it's their product, and one of the biggest successes they've had, on cable television and then also in the streaming services, that it would be kind of foolish for them to not think about possibly resurrecting the Sheriff like that and having Longmire maybe come back.
Would you have the same actors?
Oh yeah. There's no way. I'm not telling any of them that they can't come back. They've all been very, very clear that they want to come back.
They're reading from this book. Where can people find that?
They actually they can go to longmiredays.com and I think that, I'm not sure, there's a YouTube channel I believe that has a lot of them on there. But yeah, they were marvelous enough to do readings from the new book So I didn't have to read any at all on the tour they just queued up the video and suddenly I had Lou Diamond Phillips doing my reading for me, which is so great. Kind of handy.
What did that feel like? What did that feel like to hear them?
It was really, really wonderful because I was used to hearing the actors reading, whenever they would do dialogue, or things like that, whenever they were doing the television show and everything. But I wasn't used to hearing them, read narrative like that would go on for pages. And especially when it's your own writing, to hear the wonderful and incredible job that they did. They really did a magnificent job on these readings And so I would advise everybody to switch over there and try and catch those readings because they really knocked themselves out and did a marvelous job.
I can't imagine the goosebumps you must have felt. Your words read so beautifully. We're running out of time like crazy. A couple more quick questions. Taylor is saying in the chat, one of the things I love about the series is Walt's introspection of self, of surroundings. Lovely. What are some of the parts of Walt you haven't explored yet? And he says, here's the question of the day. If you sat down to write a novella about Walt and COVID, would he hate Zoom more than cell phones?
I don't think that the sheriff's department would ever let Walt get near a Zoom conference. I don't think they would realize that that would be just an utter disaster. Like it is what it would be. I actually did do a short story. Like it's called Music Appreciation. And it's actually available on the Longmire Days website too. And it's a COVID short story, is what it is. And it was interesting like that because it's always fun to take the character like that and then
Why
kind
did
of
you
like
do that?
let's see, it was actually for Longmire Days. I did it for Longmire Days. And I think I can't remember how much it is. I think it's $1 or something like that, and you pay. And then what it does is for, wounded warriors, for the canine warriors, and the animal shelters, that's where all the money goes like that. But yeah, it's always a challenge, to take, controversial subjects, not controversial subjects, but certainly, topical subjects.
I mean, you're even
utilize
Next to Last Stand is even about racism and culture and history and emotion, all those, and veterans as well. Speaking of which, and as we're running out of time, speaking of which, Next to Last Stand, there are people talking about retiring in Next to Last Stand, and Next to Last Stand, I mean, anybody who reads is going to think this has fraught with subtext and double meaning. Are you trying to telegraph something? Please say no.
I can honestly say no. That generally what I was trying to do was be funny. For Walt, and dealing with the last stand, and this being, his next to last stand, and the possibility of dealing with this painting, and the little bighorn and all that. But no, I mean, it's been kind of a shock to me. There've been a lot of people that have written me emails, and contacted me and said, is this the next to last Walt book? Is this it? Is this the end? No, I don't know.
Do you have more planned? Are there more?
Oh yeah, I'm already 13 chapters into the one that'll be out next year. It's called Daughter of the Morning Star.
Oh, beautiful.
And then I've already got the outline I'm working up, and doing the research for the one from 2 years from now, and it's called let's see, Hell and Back. And so I've got a file folder of all of the ideas and and outlines that I've got for all the Walt Longmire books that it's about a foot thick. I mean, what I'm worried about, Hank, is dying before I get all of them written. It's kind of like being it's like going to the track with the horses you're looking at all these stories and you get better at it as time goes by but you look at the stories as as horses will this one be able to go the distance? Will this one be able to will this be a good one has it got a good bottom to it? Will it make it? And I've got more than I'm going to be able to write already and the other thing is like you were saying before, he hasn't lost his ability to surprise me like that. I mean, Walt, continues, Henry, Vic, everybody, they all, the characters just continue to surprise me in their responses like that. And as long as that's the case, I'm more than happy to write Walt Longmire.
And when you sit down and type chapter 1, do you still get a chill?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The best way I know to describe that was Jim Bouton, who was a pitcher in the major leagues, and wrote a wonderful book called Ball 4. And the way he used to describe it was the thrill of the grass. Whenever you would run out onto the ball field, don't forget to have that thrill of the grass, and what it's like. You type that first chapter 1 and get started it's a whole new journey, it's a whole new place to go to, and you may think where you're going, and you may think all the answers, but no, that book will teach you something as you go along. It's always a blast.
And I know that must have happened in Next to Last Stand, a wonderful book. And I will close by saying 2 things. One is, thank you. You promised you'll come back in real life, in person.
Anything you ask me to do, I do it. You know that.
I ask for all.
Even when I have to break the bad news about ducks to you, even when I have to be the one to break the bad news about the ducks to you.
We'll talk about that the next time. All of you attendees, inside joke about our ducks in our backyard. I told Craig that they came every 20 years, and Craig wrote me this little email saying, honey, the duck's lifespan is 8 years, so they're not big ducks. It was so tender. I printed it out and saved it. But I do want to read you in closing and in thanking you and handing it off to Robert. One of the you should see the comments. Someone says, so relieved there's more Longmire coming, says Diane. And P to all panelists says, how wonderful to have two super authors. Thank you. And Janet says, awesome. Thank you so much. Love Longmire. And Chris No Carl says, love you. Hope you write forever.
Oh, thank you.
That's so nice. So thank you. We all feel that way. And
Oh,
thank you so much for being
Thank
here.
you, Hank. Thank you. You're the one that did the heavy lifting today. Thank you.
My total pleasure.
And congratulations on your new book. My goodness.
Oh, my goodness, thank you. Yeah, I'm very pleased about it.
You are everywhere.
Thank you.
And so speaking of Hank's new book, it is available at Wellesley Books, autographed, first to lie. The link was in the chat. It will be in the feedback survey tomorrow. And again, obviously, Craig's book, Next to Last Stand, also available, autographed copies, Wellesley Books, link in the chat, link in the survey. Want to thank Craig and Hank for an amazing talk tonight. What a wonderful hour. I, for one, really enjoyed it, and I think the other 100 or so people on the call did as well. And just a last minute reminder that we're having Gregory Maychek in conversation with Daniel Handler, AKA Lemony Snicket, on Wednesday, October 14th at 7 o'clock. Hope to see some of you there as well. So for Hank, for Craig, and for Erin behind the scenes, thank you all so much for joining us here tonight. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their weekend. Thanks again.
Good night. Thank
Everybody.
you.
Bye, Hank. Thank you so much.
Love you.
Love you too. Bye.